Okay, so I only got about 10 minutes, so I'll try to give you an idea of what it is that I do in terms of screencasting. And if you have any other questions, I can certainly see you after the sessions are over. As Mark said, we both use screencasting, but we do it with different objectives and we use it in slightly different ways. Let me give you an idea of my entire course about how it's put together and where exactly the screencasting fits in. What I like to do, if I can at all, is to make my courses open, to have them shared with anybody who wants to have access to them. And so I've moved from running my courses on a course management system like WebCT to running them on wikis, which are just websites that are easy to change. Even students can actually change them pretty easily. And if you think about teaching, you've got content, interaction, and assessment. The only component that I'm currently doing on a WebCT right now is assessment. So quizzes and tests. The students do testing under video surveillance, so the entire course could be done online. The interaction I won't talk too much about here, but it's basically you can do it through the blog, through email. The content is really what we're talking about, is how do you generate content that is multimedia, that is available online in a simple way. And that's really where the screencasting comes in. I'm the e-learning coordinator in the College of Arts and Sciences at Drexel, so it's my responsibility to help faculty who want to put their content online. A lot of them have a preconceived notion that that's a very difficult and time-consuming thing to do, and it can be if you want to build something from in Flash from scratch. But if you have very little time and you want to leverage that time, screencasting is a really good way to do it, because as Keith showed and Mark, if you start with a laptop, if you already teach with a laptop, you just continue teaching with a laptop. You just have to run software. We use Camtasia, which is very similar to the software that Keith was using. If you're using a chalkboard or overheads, then what you need to do is to transfer over to a tablet PC where you write on the screen, and that's very, very similar to writing on a chalkboard or on an overhead. Difference is that you're going to be recording it. So I'll try to end a little bit early so we can show you an example of the stuff that Mark and I are doing. And the process is very simple. In fact, I'm recording this right now. All I did was hit F9, and at the end I'll hit F10, and I'll save that as an AVI file. Then there's a number of things that I can do with it. There are ways you can modularize it, so you can cut it in smaller pieces if you want to, or you can do a podcast or a vodcast. And again, I don't have time to go into the details of that, but I'd be happy to help anybody. What do my wikis look like? I have one wiki for each one of my courses. I teach organic chemistry, Chem 241, 242, and 243, and the addresses are just chem241.wikispaces.com, for example. And that's really the equivalent of what you'd get in WebCT, the login page when the students first come in. So my login page just happens to be open to anybody who wants to take a look at it. And so here, this is basically my contents. There are all kinds of things that are connected here: the syllabus, the class FAQ, the class blog. Take a look at some of these. I use a blog to organize my screencasts and also to do a real podcast, which is where you can go on iTunes, for example, and download them all to your iPod. And it turns out that using a blog is a really convenient way of doing that. What it looks like is really just like this. This is a post from Lecture 13. I'll usually write a little bit about what it is we covered in the class, and then I'll link to the MP3 file, so that's just the audio. I'll link to the PDF. So as I'm writing on the tablet PC, that file is being saved as a PDF. And then I make it available in Flash format, which is very, very similar to what you saw in the last talk. And I also make it available in formats that are downloadable for video. The way the students subscribe to this, again, not that much time, but basically there's a button at the top of all my blogs. When the students click on it, if they don't know anything about RSS or blogs or anything like that, it'll take them through the process of the subscription. Bloglines is one of the readers that I use that is pretty convenient. The way it shows up for students is like this. Whenever there's a new post, it'll show up in bold. So you could subscribe to several RSS feeds, as Mark was talking about, and you can know when there's been an update by using a reader such as Bloglines. To subscribe to the podcast, which is either the audio or the video or the files, there's a simple way to do it, which is there's a button that the students can click that's at the top of my blog, And what will happen is I'll pop up and there's a description of the class. Here are all of the enclosures, the files that the students are getting. And these can be, the ones that don't have icons are audio MP3s, the ones that have a little book are PDFs. You can also do, so MP3 and PDFs can be podcasts. You can also podcast the video in the format of an M4V file, and that will show up in iTunes. Or if you sync it to your video iPod, and I actually brought my video iPod if any of you are curious to see, you can actually see the molecules pretty well when you're drawing a mechanism. Students can also do blogs. I have students doing blog assignments. The advantage of that is that they can share what they're finding with other students can comment on it, and students from around the world. Just a quick note on what happens. Mark and I have different results. What he observed is he has no drop in attendance. When I did a class that I put I record the entire lectures, which is different from what Mark is doing. And I gave the students the option of either coming to class or not coming to class. And in the times that I did that, the same thing happens. Attendance starts out, reasonably high, and then decreases to about 10 to 20% by the time the last lecture comes up. So now, looking at the population of students that were coming to class every time and looking at the population that did at least part of it online, the averages are, within 1%. So that told me that, hey, maybe this is not the best way to spend my time. So since that time, I've stopped doing lectures. I now assign the recorded lectures, and I do workshops instead during the class time. So we do a number of things. I'll be giving another talk on Wednesday on using games in organic chemistry, and so I can show you some of that. But just two points before I go here. These are open, and I think it's really important that we make these available, if at all possible. Sometimes you have copyright issues, you can't really do it, but if you have no copyright issues, then if you can make your lectures available, you'd be really surprised who's interested in it. Here's an example of the subscription to my class podcast. This is the first time I taught it. This is the second time, and actually, I didn't even teach it this term. What I did is I put it on iTunes. I put it on iTunes, and what happened is, I got 600 people that are looking at this class that's not even, currently being used. So I think you'd be very, very surprised as to, what kind of people are watching it. And if you look at the logs, everything that I talk about here can be done for free, including, this tracking software and everything. The people really come from everywhere around the world. You would be really surprised. Your students will actually be the minority contribution from your sites. So I guess I got time, 1 minute or two. Can maybe show a quick recording. Yeah, if there are questions, I will, talk to you. So here's my chem241.wikispaces. And here's the class blog. So this is one of the ways. There are many ways of accessing the recorded lectures. And so basically, if we scroll down here, right, here's alkenes 1.
So just before we look at different ways of making alkenes,
so this is also Flash.
Take a look at a little bit of nomenclature.
It's streaming. So basically, that means that as it's downloading, students can watch it. So if their connection's a little slower, that'll still be okay.
Okay, so for that compound, there would be two different possibilities because I do have sister.
So as you see, it's very similar to what we saw a little bit earlier. So I guess I do have time for maybe a question or two. Yes.
One thing I found out, I was surprised too the attendance didn't go down. I was using a tablet PC that I stumbled on is I'm not a technophile. But what happened was I moved to a new place and I had been used to have 2 projectors, one to show everything for problem solving and one for PowerPoint. When I didn't have that, I panicked because that was kind of how I thought about it. So what happened was I got a tablet PC where I could write on the tablet PC, and then my graduate students showed me how to save the file. So I'm talking and it's going on at the same time. Attendance didn't drop, partly because the other thing that was being instituted were the clickers. They're the ideal combination for this, because then you can make class more interactive, because you have a little more time because the lectures are up, and if they get points for the clickers, then most of them are willing to come to class regardless of whether they can see the lectures online. So I saw that the lectures were primarily being used for like a security blanket, as opposed to missing class.
I was curious how many people here were podcasting.
Cool.